Hi, I am Jane Deluzio, the current president of the Council of Ontario Drama and Dance Educators. On behalf of CODE, I welcome all of you who are joining us for our tribute to David Booth. We celebrate him as a mentor, a master teacher, and one of CODE's founding members. To begin, CODE has created with our Indigenous partners a call to action for all drama and dance teachers.
CODE acknowledges that our association spans land across Turtle Island, which is the traditional territory of many Indigenous peoples. We honor them as the original storytellers and stewards of this land. May we never forget their legacies, and may we learn well the lesson their descendants have to teach us about living on and with the earth. We will practice this sign of respect, acknowledge the rich history of these lands and Indigenous nations, honor the truth of the past, and uphold our original treaty, the Two-Row Wampum, to peaceably care for the land and each other through our drama and dance teaching practices.
We begin our tribute with Bob Barton, honorary member of CODE, teacher, storyteller, and one of David's lifelong friends and colleagues.
How many miles to Babylon? 70 miles and 10. Can I get there by candlelight? Yes, and back again. If your heels be nimble and light, you can get there by candlelight. David took great interest in what he called the culture of the tribe called childhood. By this, he was referring to the children's oral tradition of chants and tongue twisters and jingles and skipping rhymes and the body of folk poetry known as Mother Goose. And it's from that body that How Many Miles to Babylon became a particular favorite of his. He spoke often about its magical qualities. He was curious about the purpose of the journey. He loved the call and response structure and the sense of urgency suggested by the mysterious voices. Now, in some of the initial dramas that he built around that run, he concentrated on the necessity to take a night journey. But as time went on, he realized that the journey wasn't the issue. The big idea here was the arrival in Babylon in time for the lighting of the candles. A candle is lit, and a small circle of yellow light widens, pushing back the darkness. It's a magical image symbolizing many possibilities: security, support, love, the spirit of truth, optimism, perhaps enlightenment. The quest for Babylon to witness the lighting of the candles seemed an appropriate metaphor for David's personal drama journey. And that journey begins in Hamilton, Ontario, as a teacher in the elementary grades, teaching drama on Rotary. And in the preface of his book, Poems, Please, David gives us a glimpse of what those times were like for him. He writes, teaching speech and drama on Rotary to 600 inner city grade 7 and 8 students. Assemblies to run every other Friday. Oh, the work. That work included teaching 6 periods a day, 5 days a week. There was no prep time, no spare periods. And when the instructional parts of the day ended, it was rehearsal time for all of those assemblies. 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, 12:15 to 1:15, 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock. Perhaps a more accurate word for assemblies would be shows. There needed to be a new show every second week. Now, there was a dearth of scripted material for elementary students at that time, and so that meant that new work had to be developed alongside the students. So there were adaptations of Shakespeare and Dickens, even Moliere, the creation of original musicals, and hundreds of lines of choral speaking. Now, English coordinator Bill Moore was very, very helpful to David in those early years. And Bill would organize monthly meetings for the drama teachers, and he would give out new resources and introduce ideas, and everyone would share with the others. But my very first introduction to David's work was with students, and it took place at Queen Mary School in Hamilton's East End. David and his grade eights had created a musical version of Treasure Island. The cast was enormous. The show was held in a basement gym, which had a small stage at one end. The audience gathered. The lights dimmed. And then suddenly, we were plunged into darkness. We sat in silence for a few minutes and then gradually became aware of the sound of crickets and then cicadas and the cries of night birds and the rustling of leaves and the mumbled rumblings of predators. It was happening all around us. It was my very first experience of soundscape in surround sound. And as far as I knew, David hadn't even heard of Murray Schafer or knew about the work of James Rainey. But it was at that moment that I realized David was a genius. His journey was underway.
My name is Michael Wilson, and I first met David in May of 1971 amongst the buildings you just seen on the screen, because we were at the first Code Conference at Queen's University on the main campus in downtown Kingston. And in a kind of break from the workshops, David was found on an open field along with some of the rest of us, playing with Frisbees. And when we asked him, would he like to throw a Frisbee as well? He remarked that, well, I'm the world's worst thrower of Frisbees. But he gamely attempted to do so. And after watching him throw that Frisbee, I concluded that David had a very accurate assessment of his own capabilities. Well, to actually speak of David's capabilities, in that conference and in succeeding conferences in the first part of the 70s, he, along with his inspiring partner, Bob Barton, used to take all of the attendees at those conferences, and some of them had as many as 500 people, and they would conduct a giant improvisation among all of us. And many of the attendees were drunk at that time. And yet what the two of them together produced, David and Bob, was utter magic. And we all remember those two people for that magic they created in all of those early Code conferences throughout the 70s. I actually want to speak mostly, though, about David's respect among the academy, among the universities of Canada in particular. You'll hear more later in this tribute about his remarkable achievements in England. But I want to talk first of all about the idea that he was invited on many occasions to speak at university meetings and presentations. And one in particular I remember was the Canadian Society for the Study of Education annual conference held in 1999 at the University of Ottawa. And of course, CSSE like to call themselves the Learneds. Only in the academy could you have such arrogance. In any case, David was a keynote speaker at that particular conference, and there were thousands of people in the audience, and he was pure magic. He was given an immediate standing ovation at the end of that presentation. And I remember that particularly well. And he did so many times at university campuses across the country. And of course, in the 80s, he was a full-time professor at OISE and given that distinction of full professor, and retired from OISE with the distinction of Professor Emeritus. And succeeding that, he spent 2 years as the scholar in residence at Nipissing University. On a more personal note, I was honored to have David be a member of my thesis committee when I was doing my doctoral studies at OISE, and he was as supportive and remarkably proficient at suggesting improvements to the thesis idea to me and to many other people who were doing similar doctoral work. On one occasion, when my research idea, which combined case study and self-study, met with some opposition by the graduate department at OISE, and my chair actually suggested that I might change my approach to better meet the standards that OISE had. And without my asking, David actually went to the graduate department and succeeded in having them change their minds about the research methodology I wanted to use, and they accepted it, and I was able to complete my study. Without David, I don't think I would have been able to do that. And he never told me anything about it. And a few years later, when I discovered that, in fact, he had played that role, I suggested that to him, and he merely said to me, "We have to look out for each other." He winked and smiled and walked away. And that was he was like, always in the background to support people in their own academic studies, never seeking the spotlight, although on many occasions he could not avoid it. He had huge respect across the academic world throughout the country. While he was at OISE, he was working with the person at that time who was the considered guru of arts education, Richard Courtney, and they got along beautifully together. David even wrote a book about him. David was not a large man physically, but he was a giant of humankind.
David flew to Edmonton in the late 1960s to attend weekend workshops given by Brian Way. And this was a significant turning point in David's drama journey. Cranking out one assembly after another with all the attendant performance development and rehearsal time required was a sure recipe for burnout. But Way's approach to developing whole class improvisations and group work excited David as a key strategy for exploring ideas and sharing works in progress. And he was equally impressed by the emphasis on community building that was central to Way's work. Now, it was during the development of the student text, Nobody in the Cast, that David began to reshape his thinking on the purpose of drama in the education of young people. And in lively debate with the brilliant Longman editor, Stan Skinner, he was able to clarify his thoughts about why the teaching of drama was an essential part of human development. For him, personal development, not production, became the heart of his quest. He wrote, "Everyone is a participant, looking into the mirror of life. For when you study drama, history, or literature, you learn to understand other people better, and in so doing, to understand yourself more fully." Further on in that book, referring to the drama activities, he says, "The purpose of the activities is the doing, not the finished product." David actively sought out interesting minds to engage with. He loved ideas. He thrived on debate. He was keen to support risk takers. Then in the early 1970s, he uprooted himself from Hamilton and took a consulting position with the Borough of York. His new boss was Frank McTagg, whom David regarded very highly, and who provided David with the opportunities to develop his thinking about how the world of drama and theater provided opportunities to explore one's humanity and to try out and represent one's ideas. And in the years to follow, David's journey would include working with Juliana Saxton and Chuck Lundy at the Faculty of Education, University of Toronto, with Richard Courtney, Gordon Wells, Larry Swartz at OISE, and Dorothy Heathcote and Gavin Bolton at Durham University, England, and Jonathan Neelands at Warwick University. And that time in England was another major turning point for David, because here he learned new and collaborative ways of teaching that would shape his approach to helping teachers to teach drama.
I met David in 1971 after moving from New York to begin one of the first secondary school theatre arts programs, as they were called in those days, at Vaughan Road Collegiate in the old city of York. David had been brought to the board by the legendary English coordinator Frank McTague. Our meeting was very memorable. One day I was working with a grade 11 drama class when there was a knock at the door, and one of my tallest students opened it, and there was this immaculately dressed man peering up at the student, who turned and said, "Mr. F, there's a gentleman at the door." Gentleman. Gentleman was a word rarely heard even in those days. We welcomed David into the class, and he said to me, with the kids hanging on every word, "Frank said to come to introduce myself. He thought we might click." Who was this guy? My students and I were puzzled. David told us who he was, and then had each student introduce themselves to him. The bell rang, nobody moved. And David and my journey had begun. We did click. David introduced me to Dorothy Heathcott, and I spent 6 weeks working with her that were transformational. They changed my whole approach to drama and theatre. David was like that. He connected people. Through David, I taught at the old Faculty of Ed at U of T, and over many decades, he was, to me, mentor, confidant, advocate, but mainly, and most importantly, friend. We planned and introduced the study abroad programs in the UK and Australia. We worked together for 7 incredible years at OISE. They were such creative times. David had this extraordinary ability to work intimately with children, always allowing them to own their learning in and through the drama. I recall after a demonstration class, when someone asked him about a student who had been sitting under a piano the entire time and not saying a word. How was she involved? David responded, "Ask her who she was during the drama." The young girl's answer was clear and pertinent to the play being built during the class. She had been totally involved in the lesson. My relationship with David was an ongoing conversation over nearly 50 years about things personal, about the state of education, about learning through and in drama and theatre. Thank you, David, for the unique contributions you made to code, to drama, to literacy, to literature, children's literature, and to the many students and educators, both national and international, with whom you worked and inspired. David brought joy and knowledge to all of us, and we will continue to be mightily influenced by the legacy that he has left.
Hi, it's lovely to be here reflecting with you all, and I thank you so much for inviting me. You know, you get to know someone pretty well when you share an office with them. Now, our office was full of bookshelves. I had one because there are only a few drama texts available at that time. All the rest were filled with picture books. I remember being terribly anxious because Linda had come in to remind David of a workshop he had that afternoon with teachers, and I was worried he hadn't had any time to prepare. "Don't worry, Jude," he said, pulling a bunch of picture books, tucking them under his arm. "These are my friends. With them, we'll be all right." And he was, every time, time after time. I remember being in the sound booth of the studio at FEUT with Chuck Lundy and David, and the whole class was beating on the walls and the doors and the windows, demanding that we come out and meet with them. I can't remember what the drama was about, but I know they were engaged and committed, that's for sure. "Time, I think, for reflection," said David, calmly stepping out into the melee and leaving Chuck and me to try and recover our mojo. He was an extraordinary teacher. And he was able to find in even the shallowest of work resonances of extraordinary depths. He taught us how to share our work, and for that we will be forever grateful. He was a great mentor and a magical teacher, eh? Oh, I do wish I was with you. Have a good time.
David was the lead writer for the 1984 Ontario Ministry of Education support document, Drama in the Formative Years. And in that document, he mounted a strong rationale for the place of drama in the education of all young people. He wrote, "Drama provides the building blocks for social development. By encouraging children to rehearse alternatives in life and to note their consequences, drama broadens their repertoire of verbal and nonverbal interactive behavior. It allows them to experiment with a variety of social roles, and this in turn helps them to empathize and identify with others." In his book, Story Drama, 10 years later, he underscored drama's contribution to thought. And to paraphrase, the arts tend to be associated only with the affective domain. Inventiveness and problem solving can be developed through gathering data, planning and selecting information, experimenting with alternatives, implementing solutions, and sharing them with others. Drama is of significant value in promoting thinking. Throughout his drama journey, David generously acknowledged the contribution of his mentors and fellow drama travelers and what they had helped him to understand about drama's importance. During the 60 years or so that David and I engaged in conversation, he never failed to express his gratitude to Bill Moore, who had started him off on his drama journey in the first place. Well, the rest is history. David's heels were indeed nimble and bright. He arrived in Babylon for candlelight.
Hello, dear friends, and I trust you are all well. So David Booth in 20 seconds, impossible. David is one of our ancestors. Every step we take follows in the inspiration and the path that he laid for us. He lifted generations of teachers and learners into new worlds of knowing and discovering through drama. A gentle, warm, humorous, humble giant of an ancestor who will always be with us, is amongst us today. Feel his presence today, celebrate his legacy, celebrate the man.
My name is Patrice Baldwin, and I first met David Booth 25 years ago when I attended a workshop that he gave. I have never seen anybody work so incredibly with drama and story. He really could connect you in a powerful way, which was so skillful and intuitive. So a very, very special practitioner and a very special man.
David Booth, strong, brilliant, masterful teacher, gentle, caring, giving, friend of 46 years, giving yet never expecting anything in return, a true definition of love. My name is Amar Harris.
My name is Kathy Fermani in London. When I was completing my master's in drama at Western, I reached out to David in Toronto to be my supervisor, and he said yes. David was so generous with his time and his support. I will be forever grateful for his wisdom, his kindness, and his friendship.
From David, I learned about the power of story. Your story, my story, our co-constructed story, about the power of a good question, when to be fierce and when to be tender. Thank you, teacher and dear friend, David.
David Booth was a beautiful paradox of a man, fiercely private and an astonishingly public figure, extraordinarily witty and sardonic, and the deepest thinker. I learned from David that teaching is a profoundly intimate encounter, where teacher and students together are responsible for its beauty. I learned that real risks should be taken and averted, and it was the responsibility of the teacher to know the difference. David was fiercely loyal and an amazingly hard worker, but he also knew when to quit, to make a quiet and elegant exit, and so he did. I miss him terribly.
David Booth was my professor. He was incredibly perceptive. He had a wicked sense of humor and a heart of gold. And he taught me to mentor by example. When a student just couldn't manage, it was impossible. David would guide them to imagine and find possibilities and to move forward. He made an amazing impact on all of our lives. And he became a cherished friend. I miss him so much.
John and I are grateful to have known David as our dear friend. We met shortly after we opened Theatre Books in 1975. His enthusiasm and support for our new endeavor encouraged us to build our drama section into a singular resource for all teachers. Through the years, we saw his inspirational writing and teaching ignite the practice of countless teachers. David loved us and honored our work. Who could ask for anything more?
The last book that David Booth wrote was called Willa's House, which is a beautiful picture book set in Stratford, Ontario, about his old friend and dear friend Willa, who was a brilliant teacher who lived with her parents in a house in Stratford on the main street. There's something very beautiful and idyllic about this life, a life that David wished for all of us to have, both professionally and personally. And I think he would be thrilled by the illustrations that are just lovely. At the end of the book, in the last page, you will see David Booth with his son Jay driving by Willa's house. And it's just a lovely little moment from David Booth's life's work.
David Booth has written many, many, many books that are probably sitting on your shelves. His last publication for Pembroke Publishers was called What is a Good Teacher? Now there's a question that invites contemplation. And David's answer to that question was, you get to be good by you surrounding yourself with people who want to be good. And that certainly has been the Code experience, good people all around. I want to play a little game with you. I need you to gather in a circle, but circumstances don't allow for that. So we'll just have to pretend that we're in a circle in the drama room. So I want you to either do a thumbs up or wave, or perhaps you can clap. Thumbs up, wave, or clap. And the way this Zoom experience is, we won't be able to see you, but David's watching you as you answer these questions. How about clapping if you've ever taken a drama class with David at the Faculty of Education, University of Toronto, FUT? Clap if you've taken a literacy or arts course with David at OISE. Have you ever sat in David's office getting some advice? Have you ever quoted David Booth's words? Have you ever sat around in a pub with David Booth? Clap if you have. Have you gotten your master's degree or your doctorate through David Booth? Have you ever laughed at something that David Booth has said? Clap your hands if you've laughed at something David has said. And have you ever attended a workshop that David Booth presented at Code over the years? David has many roles that you know him by. He's an instructor, an author, a thesis advisor, a confidant, a therapist, a workshop presenter, a keynote presenter, and a friend. He's had many roles at OISE and in the educational field, but perhaps you really know him through the spectrum of roles he's undertaking you, guiding you into the fictional as-if world of drama. And many of these roles, you might recollect, were featured at Code sessions. You might remember a storyteller who asked you if you'd rather that your house was surrounded by water, snow, or jungle. How about a judge who warned you that a horrible thing was coming this way? A wizard who tempted you with green glass beads. He was the leader of a bat community, inviting you to hang on to your history and share your stories. He was an expedition leader, intruding on a community of Native citizens to take away their land. He always asked in this workshop on the novel Ringer, he would ask you if you could wring the neck of a pigeon. Wring the neck of a pigeon. He was a citizen who challenged families to send their sons off to be miners. And this was done at David's final demonstration workshop, and it was at the Code conference, and we saw a few slides of that. But perhaps you'll remember David as a king who demanded that you create fountains in his glory to glorify his splendor. And then he took those fountains away from the villagers.
In 1980, the Toronto Board of Education produced a video called Drama in the Classroom, in which 4 teachers taught drama to different levels and grade levels of students. In the culminating part of the video, David Booth works with a grade 1 class at Charles G. Fraser Public School. Now these kids it was October, and they were very much almost kindergarten-y. And they had never done very much drama before. So David persevered and worked with his favorite picture book, The King's Fountain, in which the king is going to just take the water away from the villagers. The last moment in the videotape is a wonderful moment with a little boy who probably is about 45 years old now, who challenged David to think in new ways. It's a wonderful video.
Listen here, there's 2 kings. Yeah.
Everybody sit down fast. What are you going to do?
I think get the water back.
Get the water back? You have come to my palace to get the water back for the people?
Yeah.
Why?
We heard that.
We did. Why do you want the water back?
I heard feed our animals. Stand up on guard.
My guards are ready. This imposter has come forward here.
Snap your fingers.
Just a moment, I'm very worried. I'm worried that someone has come all this way to my fountain to get the fountain back for the people. Why have you done this?
So we could drink and feed the animals. Take him out. Can't take
You villagers. You stand. There are two kings here. This one has come to get water for the village, and I am the king that built the fountain. Who do you feel would be the best king? Or he'll answer.
He's the one who's the king.
Why do you say that?
Because he wants to get the water back for the villagers.
I'm going to make an announcement. Because this man was so brave, I have decided to let him be king. Are there any other villagers who wish to speak? Stand up. What do you think we should do?
Make him a king or him a king? Him.
I don't know what to do now.
You should share half for you and a half for us.
Now, just a moment. We have to discuss this carefully. New king, you make the decision. Guards, over here by me. Make the decision, new king. Stand up. Sit down, you. Your idea. I appreciate your idea. What do we do?
You go find your own water and build your own fountain.
He has said I should leave. And I and my guards, we will leave. Stand up. And will you be a good king?
Yes.
And what will you do for the people of the village?
Let them have the water.
Will you?
Yes.
And will you rule well and fairly?
Yes.
My guard, you have to make a decision, my guards. Will you come with me, or will you stay with the village and the new king?
The village. I'll stay with the village.
And you?
I'll stay with you.
Why?
Because you're the best king.
David's legacy will live on through his books and recordings, and through teachers who have been and who will continue to be influenced by David's philosophies and inventiveness.
David's heels were nimble and light throughout his storied career, and his memory is forever wrapped in candlelight. We are all David's legacy. On behalf of Code, thank you for joining us for this tribute to David. We invite you to join us for Code's 50th anniversary launch at 1:45.